Good morning. So I thought this morning we would start with a few biotech industry veterans, people to come and share their wisdom about the drug development processes, how to get to market, also just the progressive innovation that we see in this sector. So I'd love to introduce Thian Chew and also Teng Lin to the stage. Well, thank you for joining us today. There's going to be a lot that we're going to discuss, the good and the bad of working in a highly innovative sector. But I think it'd be nice for the audience to sort of share a little bit about your background and just sort of experiences in terms of getting here. Thian, I might start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. So I have a slightly less typical background getting into biotech. I actually started in the commercial and investing world at KPMG and Goldman Sachs, New York, Hong Kong. And I actually took the entrepreneurial path and literally bumbled into biotech about a decade ago and found that it's full of very interesting personalities. But the way to get special outcome is actually to bring everyone together with very disparate backgrounds. I'm a part-time professor as well at UCL in the Global Business School of Health and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, trying to combine the business and life sciences.
Amazing, thank you. And Ten?
Actually, I'm a scientist by training. I'm a computational chemist by training. And my first job out of grad school is a company called Schrödinger in New York. I think it's the first one of those AI drug discovery went public in NASDAQ. And I was there for 10 years doing very different things. I was a software developer, and then I moved to run the core product team for a couple of years, and then eventually I migrated to the business side. And after that, actually, I moved to China and joining an insurance company and running the subsidiary on the diagnostic side for a couple of years. And I think 7 years ago, I actually moved back to the States and joined a company called Extopi. So we are one of the first AI for drug discovery company went public in China. So right now I'm responsible for the business development and corporate development for the company.
And you've been doing an incredible job because you've pretty much pinned down every major pharma on like a very big deal.
I think pretty much of those top 20 pharma are our client, and we did a lot of the deals left and right.
Amazing. And just honing in on one of the things that you mentioned, AI, it's like the topic du jour. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about just basically the AI capabilities at Extopi and just with a degree of specificity on just like the way the models work and how this is like also there's a little bit of spread of difference from what people are familiar with in terms of large language models, just like the breadth, and then obviously you have the automated labs and things like that. So I mean, there is real technology and automation that runs through the organization.
So yeah, no, I mean, I think I just would like to clarify, right? Recently we using a lot of deep learning, but we also using a lot of traditional computational chemistry method, using like molecular dynamics and whatnot, right? For us, it's really you pick the right algorithm to solve the right problem, right? And the times if you don't have enough data, I think some of the semi-empirical model probably better. And there's times the model just simply doesn't work. You have to rely on the human intelligence. So I think what we're really doing is combine the algorithms and robotics and the human intelligence to accelerate the drug discovery. And certainly we're also expanding to material science as well. So in terms of different kinds of model, I think we have a division that was working on the small molecule. We have a business unit was working on the antibody and the protein design as well. And Aaron, back to the question, the model we're building different. I mean, certainly we're using some of the large language model. For example, one of the focus the company was working on right now, it's to automate the chemical synthesis, which is actually, if you are doing the small molecule drug discovery, and you know it's actually not an easy problem, right? Given you have the AI model to generate a molecule, but if you cannot make it, right, it doesn't count because you have to really go to different kind of experiment, right? Certainly, I mean, animal testing, cell assay, but if you cannot make it, right, I mean, that it doesn't count. So, and this is actually a difficult problem. And I mean, the pharma was kind of like handing over to the CIO to do it. But again, this is actually a pretty big problem. And the people have been trying to doing this for decades. I think the real problem there is actually a lack of the negative data. So we are actually building one of the biggest facilities in the world. Right now, we have 300 robots working on automated chemistry. And we're collecting a lot of data to build that model. And one interesting observation we have is actually we compare the human expert in the algorithm. I think the algorithm for the positive reaction, which means let's say you have two reagents, they will react to generate a new compound. Those are positive reactions. I think the algorithm actually performed slightly better than human expert. But another interesting observation we have is like for the negative one, the algorithm, it's much, much better. Like it's close to 70%. The human expert, it's only 30%.
I mean, that just inherently is like an information. No one is incentivized
It's
to
human
share.
nature.
No one is incentivized to share negative data. And it's actually an ongoing discussion as part of the whole sort of DeSci movement is building decentralized knowledge graphs around failed experiments, because there is, in an industry where you have a 9% success rate, but only the positive things are reported, then there is effectively a lot of mystery and intrigue around what didn't work. And so maybe that also just really helps advance industry.
Right, and Aaron, there's a different types of the AI model we're training, right? For example, one of the AI model we're training, it's actually training on the simulation data. For example, quantum mechanics calculation, it's really, really slow, right? But they generate a ton of data. So we actually using deep learning to train those models and accelerate by order of magnitude. So I think it really depends on the problem you try to tackle. And there's times you don't need the large language model, right?
Yeah, and we're going to dive deeper into this in a little bit, because there's going to be a question about having these incredible discovery platforms that can knock out a lot of things, and then the capital constraint and the business-related constraint that sits on the other side about how you advance these things clinically. But I mean, shifting on to another bit of focus within the innovation sector where everyone's talking about, which is modalities, right? And so yesterday there was another bispecific company that was effectively bought by Genmab for $8 billion. So, and there's always a rage around things like in vivo CAR T is one big thing at the moment, et cetera. But I mean, you're very much focused. You have a strong evidence-based modality that's got clinical efficacy within your platform, Thian. So maybe do you want to speak a little bit about that and just and how you sort of you think through how you're going to drug a target. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks, Aaron. I guess just to give an overview of our technology, it's called photodynamic therapy. And so it's used primarily in cancers and infectious disease. So what it is this small molecule, which in the cancer context localizes just in cancer cells and not healthy cells. And then by itself, nothing happens until you shine a frequency of light, and that generates what's known as reactive oxygen species, which basically kills the cells which have the cancer. The question is, how does it just get to the cancer cells? So there are lots of cool technologies out there. Ours is really simple for the scientists amongst you. The Warburg effect is quite well known. Cancers like sugars. So we coated our core molecule with glucose conjugates. And so all sorts of different cancers gobble it up. And that basically means that healthy cells don't get it. You shine a light, just kills the cancer cells. And because of that, we're actually targeting multiple cancers for the same drug. And we're already in our second clinical trial for we did a prostate cancer trial. We're doing a skin cancer trial, non-melanoma. And we're getting ready for a rare disease, orphan designation, anogenital cancer trial. And we're working with the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Australia around that. So that's kind of our general modality. It's not that common. So, and that goes back to your other question, which is, how do we think about it? Okay, so at least from my perspective, I've found that there's a lot of groupthink in the larger industry. So if you happen to be flavor of the month, it used to be CAR T, it used to be antibody drug conjugates, seems to be GLP-1s now. If you're part of that flavor of the month, everyone is just rushing to get involved. Whether you're in early stage, late stage, it doesn't matter. FOMO is really just taking over. For us, it's not that well known. And so what that means for us is we need to de-risk it for the next guy, and that's all about clinical evidence. 1 in 10,000 lead compounds ever get approved. That 9%, that 1 in 10, that's when it starts a clinical trial. So that's already pretty good odds, 1 in 10. But if you've got the scientists working on that compound, 1 in 10,000 get approved. And that's really the fundamental issue is if you don't have that ability to bridge that gap, get into clinical evidence, and you're not flavor of the month, I think that's when it becomes tough. And that's why we're focused on clinical evidence.
And so Teng, a question to both of you now. You've effectively described, the supporting technology platform, so there seems to be an inherently huge degree of capability there in sort of unlocking new biomedical research insights. So how do you think about what to prioritize, what to advance, and other creative ways of maybe getting other assets into development?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, our compounds, because they basically blow up wherever it's next to, can work on cancers or all sorts of infectious diseases. And in terms of, if you're trying to put this compound into your bloodstream, yeah, you probably need to do all these checks and balances and make sure you've got all the safety and tox data. If you're putting on the skin and it doesn't penetrate, what's the implicit risk? And so when we look at antimicrobial, for example, applications, the last 5 companies that got the antibiotic approved went bankrupt. The model just doesn't work. And so what that means is that there's a lot of really incredibly top innovation and technologies that will never see the light of day because of the high bar to get things approved in a traditional medical pathway. And that's why even for us, we have literally over 400 photodynamic compounds. We're only using 1 for cancer. We've got plenty to choose from. So we're trying to explore alternative avenues to basically have impact. Yeah.
Amazing. And Teng,
Well, I mean, I think you try to do as much as you can, right? I mean, but again, at the end of the day, you find a drug, it's a balance of the kind of profile. It's a whack-a-mole, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's also you have the budget constraint, right? And I think this is something that in FDA, they say, hey, maybe we should do less animal testing or doing the other stuff, right? I mean, I think that's really something, I think that trend is coming, right? Organ in a trip, virtual cell model, and I think there's a lot of stuff down in the pipeline.
Well, that was the point I wanted to sort of talk about in a little bit. So I was at a talk in DC a couple months ago, and so the former acting FDA commissioner, Janet Woodcock, was up there, and she was sort of saying, industry is always barking at us about, bringing in the clinical trial requirement because it's just long, it takes more time, and she's like, what you don't understand is that it's the health insurance companies that are putting up the substantial evidence requirement. So yeah, we can approve your drug, but no one's going to pay for it. And so, I think there's a balance to effectively struck across industry in that respect. And, it's a point that we'll probably touch on later is just other paths to market where you have relevant satisfaction of non-toxic effects, but, there seems to be relevant beneficial effect in terms of what you're effectively trying to treat. But maybe just talking about other ways to effectively apply AI in the development process, because we're talking about virtual cell technology, being able to run simulations preclinically. There's now a shift on, say, for example, pharmacovigilance and being able to monitor, from a sort of market surveillance perspective, just how people are effectively responding to the drugs. So, I mean, what are you seeing, Teng, just specifically, what are you seeing sort of happening in that space?
Well, certainly, I mean, the regulatory, they're now embracing this slowly, right? And I think for the safety of the patient, they have to do it. I think that's the right thing. But I think we're already seeing, emotion right now. And I think a lot of the AI model right now, including the virtual cell, organic chip, and a lot of other, I think it's coming into the sim right now. Right? Certainly, I mean, the FDA start focus on the monoclonal antibody right now, right? And then eventually gonna go to the new modality. So I think that's kind of pathway I'm seeing.
Interesting. And I mean, Thian, do you think, I mean, you're clinical now, which means like focus is really on just getting the assets through the clinic and just, you know, achieving those relative endpoints. Like, how do you think about like other technology sort of supporting what you're trying to achieve from a clinical perspective? And do you think there's an indispensability of AI within companies? Because like ultimately at the end of the day, people in industry will tell you the asset is everything, right? And then there is just a process, like when you get into later stage trials that it's part of. But you know, I'd love to sort of understand like how you're like looking at these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's a great question because I think about that all the time because there's no doubt AI is transformative. The problem is I'm a slow adopter, so I'm trying to get my brain to sort of move up and catch up on things.
You're at a DeSci Summit, you're not a slow adopter.
I'm trying. So yeah, I mean, when I look at AI and where it can transform the most, I think of it in terms of the drug development process. So in terms of the discovery process, you know, that 1 in 10,000 drugs get approved or lead compounds get approved, I think AI's got tremendous potential there. Potentially go from, you know, 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100, maybe even 1 in, you know, less than that. And all the knowledge is combined, is really a powerful tool. If you've ever tried to find an answer by reading literature manually, I mean, you'll go crazy. So AI can just do it like that. So I think it's going to increase the odds of more successful development programs. On the other side, once a drug's been approved, I think AI has tremendous opportunity in a few areas, such as how to use the drug more effectively. Who does the drug work better on? What sort of, you know, sort of patients does it work better on? And I think there's a huge area in repurposed drugs. Once you've gone through that valley of death and got that, that drug approved, then what else can it be used for? The challenge is what's in between is that valley of death, which I'm living the dream on. And I think there's efficiencies and streamlining, but I think it's less transformative, mainly because of what you mentioned, that regulators are people, and people don't want to get into trouble. And Teng, you mentioned the key word, slowly. So, you know, they talk about, you know, in silico, you know, sort of avoiding animal trials. It takes a long time for that process to happen. So what we're doing in trying to accelerate is essentially using people with AI tools to optimize our protocols, to predict better markers, to basically, and even the trial results, to feed that through AI engines to basically see what patterns might create more successful, high probability in our patients, and therefore use them in our registration trials. So that's sort of the stuff we're thinking about, but it's not quite as transformative, I think, in the process of getting approved.
And that's where all the cost and time is eaten up, by the way, too.
That's
so
my
like
dream.
it's so Teng, question. I mean, we're sort of like here in Singapore, which is the crossroads of a lot of things in Asia, and anyone I speak to in the US. And some of the pharma companies, like I speak to the search and evaluation guys, and they're just like, "Oh, I just got back from China." Like, no. So tell us what's going on. Like, I mean, there's just like this fervor for like assets developed out of there. There are things that they just get into. They produce clinical trial evidence really, really quickly. So, you know, I'd love to hear your like perspective on it and so why things have accelerated so quickly in the territory.
Well, I would say it's really the efficiency, right? I mean, I think the US, Europe is still leading on the innovation side. But China and Asia, right, they are really excel in the efficiency, right? And it's also the ecosystem behind this. I'll just give you an example, right? If you order a reagent, I mean, in China, you probably get a same-day delivery. But if you do it in US, it's probably gonna take you a couple of weeks to clear the custom. Right. I mean, that's just one example. I think the efficiency is also including the people to work asset over there. Well, I mean, in the US, we probably work 8 hours a day. They're working 12 hours, 16 hours a day, and weekend as well. So I think that it's also the talent, right? A lot of people, they start a company, they probably get the training in the US, Europe, they work in the multinational company. And also, I think a lot of MMC, they already set up the subsidiary in China for the past 10, 20 years, right? Really training a lot of the scientists over there. So I think it's really a combination of that whole ecosystem, certainly including the cost as well.
How does the West like see this as a lesson and just go, yeah, we need to be less bureaucratic about things? And because I seriously, I witness it quite a bit. And you know, like let's just economize and like make things more efficient from our perspective. Or are they just going to learn the hard way when like innovation market diminishes in the West and like all the R&D assets are effectively of Chinese origin?
Well, I would say, I think, as I mentioned, right, a lot of the innovation still, from US still leading this, but I think China could do it more efficient. So I think maybe the better approach is you really to utilize, you know, the process from both, you know, territory, right? You have people working in the US or Europe, and you have other folks on the execution side in China, or I think maybe Europe, like, because I think we set up a lot of obstacles for the biotech and life science right now in the US. You're going to create some problem as well.
And talking about like frontier markets and new things, like Thian, like you're actively looking into the DeSci ecosystem and, you know, like possibly doing something there. Do you want to just like, could you share a little bit more about like what's on your mind?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that our compounds actually kill viruses, bacteria, fungi, so antimicrobial, as well as for cancer. Cancer, you've really, you know, we're going through the proper medical pathway. But if it's an infection, I really worry about, I don't want to be one of those bankrupt companies that got the drug approved but can't make money out of it. And you either make money by having a monopoly and selling till your patent runs out, or you just drastically reduce the cost and time to take it to market. And just looking at the back with the skincare thing, I think we can learn a lot of lessons from the cosmetic industry. There are plenty of failed drugs that became wildly successful anti-aging cosmetic products. And so it's all about the claims you make. And so as long as you're addressing safety, and it's generally, as a rule of thumb, you don't want to go systemic, then essentially, you can basically not make claims that's medical. And there are different pathways, like what the cosmetic guys use. And I think there's a lot we can learn from there. I mentioned that our technology works on bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and works very, very well across the board. So why don't we actually address some of these infectious diseases that are on the skin, so they're not going to the bloodstream, and rather than get the arbiter to be a regulator who's worried about a drug that goes systemically, is get a passionate user population who has that unmet need to basically you know, drive it and actually drive the sales and distribution and marketing and presence without us needing to make that claim. But you know, we would always still make sure it's safe. And there's also ability to leverage the disciplines from a drug development program without the overhang and the high cost and high barrier to actually get it to market. So I don't know if you want me to...
Maybe I'll share a little bit more about this. So I also moonlight as a UFC referee for all my sins. So it's fun. I've managed to sort of like keep me, I don't know, somewhat of a balanced individual over the years. But like what I've seen is like I also work with the medical commission at the UFC. I've been doing it 17 years, so like see a lot of fighter injuries and things that are really on athletes' minds. Was formerly also a competitive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athlete, and that community is rife with like staphylococcus and like various skin infections, and it wipes out a lot of the athlete communities. And for them, it's very unfortunate because they fight maybe twice a year, so they get 2 paychecks a year. That's it. Then running into the fight, they're ruled unfit to fight because of a skin infection or things of the sort. And so it's and actually someone sent me a clip from the Joe Rogan Experience the other day. So Joe's passionate about a lot of topics, right? You know, some of them tip on the sort of like very entertaining side of things, but actually from the medical perspective, it's staph infections, and he's also said that it's the worst thing that he's ever experienced. And he has a lot of athletes on his show that effectively talk about it. I know that it's a problem where people are like just effectively searching for solutions. They don't seem to be many, but I think like introducing like real biopharma innovation into a consumer pathway, and they're an extraordinary community because they exchange a lot of health information. Everyone in the gym seems to be, like really highly motivated, not only like on preventing or treating skin diseases, but just like overall athlete performance, optimizing recovery times and all of that. So they are avid consumers of longevity literature also from the performance perspective. So, we are really working with a number of top athletes within that community and also physicians.
And I think a core ingredient of that is passion. If you've got people that are really, really into it, I think you can create a better outcome. It generally is a bilateral program with Biotech and with the regulators, but you also need patience and people that are, living the dream. And so in the case of sort of skin infections, you really need to have a group of people that have the science and the disciplines of making sure you're doing things the right way. You also need the actual medical professionals who can see what's going on and see whether there is improvement. And you also need the athletes to actually basically see if that actually is working for them, and how you can develop a product that's actually better suited for what they need. So I think, and they're going to be the best spokesmen for you anyway. So you don't need the pharma companies per se to sort of bleat it out for you.
Yeah, and there's been a couple articles in the U.S. press of these guys that like they effectively look like super soldiers, and then I mean they just look shadows of their former selves after a staph infection, like double lung transplants, people that are like bedridden for like months, if not like years on end. So yeah, it's a project that we like really passionate about.
Personally, I had a staph infection myself. I used to be I used to do martial arts and taekwondo. I was a national player, so I was very passionate. I understand that passion that these athletes have, and not through martial arts, but I got a staph infection and through my eczema, and basically I had to relearn to walk 3 years ago. So I care a lot about addressing these things before they become, and not waiting 15 years. So yeah.
And Teng, one last question. We're running slightly over time, but I mean, you're here, so you've got an interest in DeSci and Web3, use of blockchain, and what it can do for scientific R&D. Like, any thoughts on like what the future would look like, and just also like what what really brings you to the sector?
Yeah, no, I mean it's not. It's a public news now. So we did a secondary offering a few weeks ago for $3 billion Hong Kong dollar, and in the announcement, I think. Some of the proceeding using to explore the RWA and the related area. And I think the Web3 design, which is the blockchain technology, is really good at the data, right? Scarcity, integrity, authenticity, right? I think this is, and we generate a lot of data, right? And for example, the chemical reaction data, I mean, we would love to work with a different group of people. And again, right, I think having a platform, how to track those, and to monetize those, I think that would be a really interesting, at least avenue we'd like to explore.
Yeah, and and something we'll talk about later in the day is that like I think once you start to introduce like liquidity into like scarce asset pools, it does just enhance overall outcomes from like broadly based value to discoverability to coordination to cooperation, all these things. And we're sort of all here because we want to see advancement within the industry. But I'd like to thank you very much. We could probably talk all day, but thanks for the time, and a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thanks.